Hello, everybody. Vincent
Hello.
Hugo from Fractal Universe here. Welcome to this new episode of the Fractal Talks. So this is actually the second one we do. Last time we invited our artwork maker, Chad, and today our guest is our longtime producer, Flavien Morel. Hello, Flavien. How are
Hello.
you doing?
Pretty good. Yeah, thank you for having me. Um, I think it's a great idea to have those like behind the scenes and having people talk about the making of the album and different aspects and all that. Because I think a lot of times when you like a band and you like an album and all that, you always want to know more. So I think it's a nice gesture for the fans to have these sort of talks and being able to interact. So yeah, it's a great idea, and so let's see how this will go.
Well, yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. So for those who didn't know, Flavien is the guy that produced all our records so far. So from Engram of Decline till The Impossible Horizon, and he's going to tell us a little bit about all of that. But before that, maybe you can introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your backstory and how you ended up being a music producer and a musician.
Yeah, well, it's a long story, so I mean, if you don't mind that, I can go in detail. But I um, I started being interested in music at a pretty young age, but it's all tied to my I would say nerd side of things because I first tried a music software when I was like I don't know 9 or 10 years old, and my older brothers they're much older than me, and so at home we always had computers. So like ever since I was born, we always had like computers laying around. And I remember trying a music software on an Atari ST, and the ST was well known, by the way, to be a computer, a home computer that was also used in studios and all that, because it was one of the only computer at the time who had a MIDI port built in. So you didn't have to buy any extension card or whatever. You could just buy a stock Atari ST and plug it into any sequencer and all that. So it was actually used to make music in professional studios at the time. And yeah, I use a little software called Quartets, I think, and it's interesting because it was in standard notation. And at the time, I didn't know anything about notation, so I was just making noise, and I found that really funny. But I didn't understand anything at all. And then my brothers they sold the ST and they bought an Amiga, and the Amiga didn't have a MIDI port, but it has built-in capabilities. Like it had a 4-track samples, so you could make music with four. You could use one track for the drums, one track for bass, or whatever you wanted. So it was quite a powerful machine, and that's I really got into that, and that's basically how I learned music by making music on that. It didn't use standard notations. It was just like a pattern, and you had the international notation, so A, B, C for the notes. Um, and yeah, I really learned like that. And so, but for many years, like until I was 18, basically, and I didn't play any instrument. So for me, like when I was thinking of the notes, I was not thinking in terms of the neck or of a keyboard. To me, it was an abstract. It was like, yeah, I knew the notes were in sequence. I knew it was, I knew a D minor was C, D, E flat, and all that. But it was completely like almost like an alphabet type of thing. So, and then I was like, you know what? It would really be cool if I started to learn an instrument because I felt it was knowledge that was maybe a little bit wasted in a way. So I picked up the keyboard because to me it was the most natural thing because it kind of resembled how you enter on that software. You used to enter the notes on the computer keyboard. If you have an AZERTY keyboard, you know the A would be the C, the Z would be the D, the E would be the E, etc. And so, and I really quickly learned how to play keyboards on my own very quickly. And so, yeah, after a few years, I went to Music Academy International, which I think you attended like 10 years after me or something like that.
Yeah, probably. I went in 2013. So
Yeah, I went in 2004.
okay.
Yeah, so, and that's the first time I ever had music lessons. Up until then, I was like completely self-taught.
And was it hard for
And
you to jump over from that self-taught alphabet stuff to jumping over to like music theory, or did it happen quite naturally? Did you manage to transpose your knowledge pretty easily?
yeah, it was very easy. In fact, like the music theory class was the thing I loved the most. I was maybe the only one in the class that couldn't wait until Friday afternoon for the music theory class, and all the drummers were depressed because, of course, it's not a jab at drummers, but it's always a little bit harder to learn music theory when your instrument doesn't play pitched notes, you know.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
but no, I loved it because all of a sudden I realized that I knew more than I thought I knew. I realized, oh, okay, this is how it's called, because I knew what a minor scale was, but I didn't even know it was called a minor scale. To me, it was just a series of notes that sounded a certain way, but all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is called this and that and this, and all of a sudden everything started to make sense in a way. So it was almost like, it was very enlightening. So I really, really loved it. And it's funny because sometimes when I read in interviews, when you read interviews by people who are self-taught, like I'm thinking of Devin Townsend, for example, or Michael Ackerfeld, and they say they don't know anything about music theory. And I think they are at the place I was before Music Academy International, where I think they know a lot, but they might not realize that they know a lot. Because when you listen to their music, it's obvious they know what they're doing. But
Yeah.
they maybe are from a place of, just putting things together that they learn themselves and all that. But it's all the same thing. But the advantage of music theory is that when you talk to someone else who knows about music theory, it's easier to explain things or to exchange ideas because you speak the same language.
Exactly.
But to me, it's just that it's not really, it's not necessarily more or whatever, but it's just that it's kind of like a, I don't know. It's what? I'm sorry. I thought Hugo said something. I'm sorry.
No. Not yet.
Okay, yeah. Oh, I think it's just I just hear the bleed for your microphone. I think that's just
Yeah, I
that.
think so.
Yeah. Oh, okay. My
Time to time,
speakers
it's-
were
it's-
on. I
it's fine.
didn't saw it. Okay. And hello, Sylvia. Hello, Tini. Just want to say hi to the guy in the chat. Hello, Pauline.
Hello, Pauline. Yeah. So yeah,
Hi.
that's really fascinating. The approach, how you started music. That it took you years before you actually learned an instrument, and I think that's really uncommon. And would you say that it influenced? That it still influences the way you think about music? Because I think you also studied like computer science and that kind of
Yes.
stuff. So you have it kind of felt natural for you, I think, to start with a computer and to still use a computer, I think. So would you say that it still influences the way you think about music now?
I think so, a little bit. Yeah, I do have a software engineering degree, and that was my first job before I bailed out, and I was okay. That's not really what I want to do in my life. So, and then I went to a Music Academy International, but I would say like the keyboard aspect of things kind of took over. Like, for example, if I'm imagining like, I don't know, a B sus4 chord, I'm immediately imagining the fingerings that goes with it and the keys that go with it. But I think it's just like practicing keyboard over and over and over. It's kind of like, but but yeah, I think like sometimes I think of ideas, and I'm like, oh, what would it sound like if you use like that scale over this and over that, and in an abstract way? And then I try them, and I realized it doesn't necessarily sound like the way I thought or whatever. But I think, yeah, I often think of music like in an abstract, and then I'm like, okay, let's try to write it and see. Like, I know in theory it makes sense, but let's try how it sounds. And but I also like to sometimes improvise and make mistakes. And sometimes the mistakes you do, you're like, oh, it sounds good actually. Which I think often when you fiddle on your instrument, it's what happens. And that's sometimes what interesting things can happen that way. But I think that what's interesting about knowing a lot about theory is that you can almost reverse engineer, and you're like, okay, I played this. It sounds interesting. Now, what is it exactly?
Yeah, that's exactly how I will work it as well.
And because
But,
I think thinking in theory is good, but I think it's also important to practice and play, and just be guided by your ears and all that. So it's important, I think, to avoid being too mechanical and too analytic. I think it's important to have both aspects when you're writing music. But yeah.
yeah, and Nibartini asks you if you can write music without playing it. Just from
Yeah, I can. Like, I mean, for example, if I have a melody in my head and it's not like super complicated, I know what it is. Like, I know what the notes are. And I remember I was in the tour bus with Benighted Soul, and I was writing music, and I wasn't even listening to what I was doing. People were chatting and all that. And the singer from the other band, she approached me and she said, "Well, you can write stuff like that." And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, I had a pretty basic idea in my head, and I know it was like some kind of pentatonic thing, so I was like able to write it down." And sometimes I remember one time I hummed a melody because I was in my car and I had an idea and I didn't want to forget it, so I hummed it on the phone, and later I transcribed it. But yeah, it depends on the complexity. But it's not as hard as it seems. If you do a bit of ear training, you can do that.
And I think
Yeah.
even people that are not musicians are like audiating the songs they know in their head. So I think they could also have the ability to change up the songs and maybe a little bit, or maybe it starts from that also, like the ability to be able to create inside your head and hear these things.
Yeah.
I think it's not that complicated. Then of course it depends on the level of complexity, but I think like a melody or something is something basically everybody could do on a certain level.
Yeah, and in the same way, it's kind of like the parallel between like knowing things and then knowing theory and knowing all what those things are. What you say, it's like the same thing with ear training. It's like you can hear stuff in your head, like everybody can do, but if you do a little bit of ear training, you can recognize the intervals and all that, and all of a sudden you can know, oh, what I'm humming, it's actually like a minor third, all that, so you can transcribe it. And it's all about like people. It's the same. Like people think music theory and ear training. It's tedious. It's boring. To me, it's interesting because I like doing those things and I like practicing my ears. And it's like ear training is like, again, being able to recognize sounds for what they are. And to me, that's interesting. And then when you listen to a song and you can say, oh, that interval is this and that. That's also. Oh yeah, another thing I forgot to mention. When I was like doing my music stuff on computer, I was also very often transcribing songs, and I think it's also a great exercise. Like I was sometimes I would like try to reproduce songs I liked on the computer with the sounds available on the computer, and to me, I was really having fun recreating that. So it was not like composition, or it was not very artistic, but it's like being able to listen to it back with different sounds, to me that was fascinating, and I love doing that. And to this day, I'm still transcribing a lot of stuff. And when we'll go into the covers that I do and all that, every time I make a cover, I transcribe it myself. Because unfortunately, a lot of times on YouTube, on the internet at large, when you find transcriptions, they are very often not accurate. So my advice is that if you want to make a cover or whatever, transcribe the song yourself. It's going to be a great exercise. You're going to practice your ears, and chances are it's going to be at least as accurate as what you can find on the internet.
Yeah, as
Because
Great training.
yeah, as a guitar teacher together with Vince, finding some inexact transcription of songs, it's sometimes difficult for students. But
I mean, on guitar, you have the added difficulty of finding the right fingering on guitar, so I guess that's also a factor. I'm not great at guitar is not my instrument, so I'm like, the fingerings I use are probably horribly wrong, but
well, if it sounds right, then it's not really wrong.
But I guess so.
I agree with you that there is no better exercise for your ear training than trying to write down some songs you like. It really helped me in my musical journey.
We have a question for you. Amongst all your covers, which one would have been the most ambitious so far? I think we're going to cover your YouTube channel in more in depth later on, but if you already answered that.
It's hard to say. Maybe it's still the Doom cover so far. I mean, Bohemian Rhapsody was kind of ambitious. Probably like I probably didn't do it justice, but But I think the one I'm most proud of, I would say, maybe it's the BFG division. But we'll go into that later, I think.
And another question. Knowing theory, would you influence a band when recording, telling them that there should be this note or whatever? What is your limit as a producer in that regard?
Yes, I would, but most of the time it's like, so in music it's kind of hard to make the difference between what is a mistake and what is not. But because you could always say, oh, it's a choice, but sometimes it's very obviously a mistake. And so I'm sorry to say, and it didn't happen with Fractal Universe, obviously, but sometimes bands that are less experienced, like I remember there was a band so the guitar, I would take a very concrete example. Like the guitar would do like a power chord, right? Let's just say you have E and B, and then it would go into diminished, E and A sharp, something like that. And the bass would play the fundamental, the E, and then because the bass player heard the fifth going down one half step, he would go down and play an E flat. And I was like, no, that's not what I think you want to do. And then, but what I would do in this case is just, when I spot a mistake like that, it can be many different things, I would just say, look, I'm going to make you listen to what I would do instead. And usually they say, wow, that's so much better. And they go with it. So it happens sometimes. And I think it's really, as a producer, you really ought to know that kind of stuff, because even though the music is not mine, I would think it's under my responsibility. Like if a band puts out something and there's some obvious wrong notes or stuff like that, it's kind of under my responsibility to know those things. So I would correct them, and but it's always difficult when you say to someone, "Hey, what you're playing now, it's wrong." There's a way to say those things. Because people, especially when you like, music is something very personal, so when you make criticize someone's music, they can sometimes take it really personally. So I just always try to come from a place of neutrality and just say, hey, let's try it this way, and it's probably going to sound better. And usually people are very receptive to that. And yeah, it happens. Now the limit is that honestly, I never say, oh, let's. I'm never like, oh, this song is too long, so you should like just cut 1 minute. I never make like that kind of changes or whatever. I try to respect the choice they make, and but if I spot something that sounds wrong to my ears, I will let them know, and I will propose a solution. And sometimes it happens that something sounds wrong, and they're like, no, it's on purpose, and they explain to me what they're trying to do, and sometimes I'm like, all right, and yeah, I guess so. Especially when you do something dissonant and all that, the limits sometimes is kind of blurry, you know. But sometimes it's something very melodic, and you hear a note that's like, it like hurts your ears, and usually it's obvious that there's something wrong.
Definitely. And actually, we didn't even talk about it, but how did you start, like, producing music? How did you get into that? Was it like a direct consequence from learning music on the computer? Or did it take some time? Did you maybe like go over to playing music more than producing it when you went to Music Academy International? Or how did it happen?
Yeah, so yeah, I didn't mention, but when I went to Music Academy International, it was to learn keyboards. It was not for sound engineering and production. But I remember it to this day. One day we had a teacher, a piano teacher, that was not available, and I guess they didn't know what to do with the students. So, and there was a teacher from the music production course that was available. So they just gave us 2 hours of music production course, and it was just an initiation to the basics with Cubase and recording and all that. And I had never touched Cubase up until that point, and to me it was like, yeah, I didn't know anything about it. It was too complicated for me or whatever. And we had this session, and I was like, oh, okay, it's actually not that complicated. And so I started using it. And it's funny because up until that point, what I would do is that, for example, if I had a song and I wanted to make a demo using the sounds on my synthesizer, I would use the MIDI and I would isolate one track. I would play the MIDI through the synthesizer, record one audio in like Audacity or whatever. I would record another MIDI track, and then I would put that together track by track in Audacity. Like I would do a merge, you know, of the 2 first audio tracks, and then the third audio tracks. If one was too loud, it was too late, or you had to go back. So it was horribly inefficient. And I realized, oh, on Cubase you can do that in real time and not spend hours manipulating audio samples. So yeah, that was my first how I learned it basically, and that was the only time in my life I ever took a course. I mean, I did took course myself, like I bought some tutorials or whatever from time to time, or I watched YouTube videos, of course. But yeah, it was the only time I had a music teacher teach me about music production software. So yeah, that was, and to this day, I kept using Cubase more and more for myself, to write demos and all that. And I think I really started because one time one of my bands recorded a demo with a guy, and I think we were disappointed in the results. And I was like, well, I'm going to try to do it myself for free for my band. And that's how I started, basically. And I learned more and more and more. And then I started getting paid gigs. and and then things started to grow bigger and bigger, and that's so I never went to a studio to learn there or whatever. So I always did things by myself and learning by myself, and trying to grow from that. Which might not be the smartest idea in the world. You probably should go to a studio to learn whatever, but that's how I did, and I learned the hard way.
Okay, and now you're working at Boundless Production Studios, basically with Clément, our drummer. And how did that happen?
Yeah. So I don't even know how it happened. I think Clément just wanted to had this idea, and all of a sudden said, "Hey, what if?" At that point, it's important to note I had already produced your first album, and so we were like, "Hey, it would be cool to have like a place to record and all that." And honestly, when he first talked about it, I was like, okay, it's one of those projects that's never gonna see the light of day. But no, the madman actually did it. So yeah, it's one of those things that actually happened, because it's that kind of projects you say, oh, it would be so cool to have our own studio and all that. But he loaned a bit of money, and he constructed the studio in his big living room, and separated it in two. And in fact, in the very beginning, we're talking with my father, because my father used to work on big construction sites, and he knows a bit about all that stuff. But he obviously doesn't know how to build a soundproof recording cabin. But we investigated that idea a long time ago. But then I think the company that built the cabin, I think they built one at what's his name, Jelly Cardarelli.
Jelly Cardarelli,
who I think has given a few lessons to Clément. I think that's where he got their contact. And the guys, it's their job to build soundproof cabins, so it was like perfect. And it worked out really, really great. So Clément can give drum lessons at home, so for him it's ideal, and we can use that as a complete recording studio. I took all the gear that I had. We put everything there, and so we have everything ready there to record. So it's it's a great partnership. I couldn't have hoped for better, to be honest. So no, it's a win-win situation.
Absolutely. And talking about our collaboration, I think we started working together on our very first EP, Boundaries of Reality. Actually, we heard of your work because you did the mixing and mastering for Hugo's other band.
Yeah.
Well, other former band, Slatcher. And that's, I think, the first introduction we had to your work back then.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Slatcher heard of me because I recorded Hysteresis before that.
Exactly.
So I think it dates back like something like 10 years ago, maybe more. So yeah, it's always like every time I try to contact random people on the internet or whatever, it never works out. But most of the time, like almost every band I've recorded, it's because they've been recommended by other bands I've worked with. So it kind of expands that way. So which I think is a good thing. I guess it shows that people were happy to work with me. So so it's funny how those things happen. But I remember when we the EP, I think, was recorded in your rehearsal room at the time.
The EP.
Actually, it had program drums, at least for the 4
Oh.
initial tracks. And this is why it doesn't sound that good. And actually, I did the mix myself also. This is another reason why it doesn't sound that good. And you only need the mastering for that. But it's true that
Oh,
for
yeah.
the 2 bonus tracks,
Yeah,
let's call
yeah.
them like that.
I'm
These
thinking
2
of
we
the.
did in the rehearsal room, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the 2 bonus tracks. Yeah, yeah, that's true.
And so yeah, for the first EP, you basically just did the mastering, but we really liked how it flowed, and the first tracks we completely recorded with you were actually these 2 additional tracks on the EP, and the drums were recorded in the rehearsal space that we had back then, and I think we tracked already the guitars and stuff at home, and this was the first mixing job you had from us, so that was pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, it was really nice, and it's always a pleasure, like, to be working with like a skilled band and with interesting tracks and all that, because it's always, especially when you're working with a ton of local bands, and they have varying levels of skill and all that, but it's hard to make like it's hard to make sound good when the players are not that great. And I'm not dissing anyone, but it's not always easy. So when you're working with players that are really really skilled at their instrument, that really work hard and all that, it makes life easier for me.
Yeah,
And
I think.
Fractal Universe is definitely that. Like probably the hardest working band I've ever worked with. So yeah, it's always a pleasure, even though it's
you.
not an easy music to mix.
but yeah,
Sorry about
I can imagine a guitar track that is not played right on time. Even with the best studio gear you have, it will not sound great, I think. So I think better musicians, I hope that helps for you to make the record sounds great.
Yeah, and like sometimes you have like absurd things. Like one time I recorded a band with like two guitar players, and they were not playing the same at all, even though they were playing the same riffs. But like one was muting the strings super tight, so his palm mute were like dum, 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 dum. The other one was like boom 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 because it was very very loose, and their guitars didn't sound the same and all that. So it's like the left and right audio tracks sounded completely different, which can be great. Like, I mean, in Iron Maiden, it can work when you have like riffs that are not like necessarily super tight, but more open, and they're playing different stuff most of the time. But when it's supposed to be the same stuff that's super tight because it's fast metal, and like one of the guitars, the neck wasn't set up properly, so the higher you went on the neck, the higher the note was relative to the pitch it's supposed to be. So the note was more and more out of tune the more it went, but the other guitar didn't. So it's like I was some point it was nightmare, and I was like, okay. So it was one of the times where I actually had to use pitch correction on a guitar track.
Okay.
So yeah, and that's when I really realized, okay, it's like you can do a lot of stuff in the mixing stage, but things have got to be good at the recording, at the time you're recording, And I mean, there's a running joke on sound engineering forums and all that is like, fix it in the mix is the worst philosophy ever. Like, you should not record something and it's not really good, and you're like, yeah, fix it in the mix. It's like, no. Fix it right away, because in the mix you're gonna have a nightmare. It's gonna be a nightmare to fix things in post, and sometimes it's not even possible, or it's possible, but it's gonna ask so much work that it's not worth it. And yeah, I've had that situation many times when I had to work extra hours because I didn't realize that. Yeah, I should have prepped the guys I was working with before, but like now it's like, okay, I know how things are supposed to go, and I can tell bands, okay, here's what you should do. And if I see that something's wrong during recording, I can correct it right away and say, no, let's do this this way or that way. And so, yeah. But again, I'm always trying not to be too strict because I often work with people who it's like the first time they go in the studio and they're very stressed and all that. So I'm trying not to yell at anyone and try to keep things relaxed and all that. And usually people are very happy with their experience when they work with me. So, but I'm just trying to set things straight and not have a hard time in the mixing stage. So, again, it's a balancing act.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I think working with a good drummer like Clément helps a lot because you don't have to do that many edits. You don't have to trigger anything because you are forced to do it because it doesn't sound good. And I think that really is a good part of your job, actually having decent musicians behind it or good musicians. So yeah, definitely
Yeah,
relate to that.
yeah, it helps a lot. And we've also like perfected like what's also ideal in having like a fixed studio where every time I record something, it's in the same place. It's like we can try new stuff, we can try new microphone positions. We always try to improve the way we tune drums and all that because it's also very important how you do all that, and it's really going to have a massive impact in the mixing stage again. So yeah, we're definitely better and better at it. So that's also a good thing. Like every time I record, I'm like excited because I'm like, oh, now I can try this stuff, and now I know it's going to sound better than the last time and all that. So yeah.
And before that, you used the studio basically in your rehearsal room from your band, and this is actually where we tracked the drums for Engram of Decline, our first record. It was in Arouet, right?
Yeah.
Close to Nancy. And this was basically your studio. It had a control room and everything. And you tracked, I think,
Yeah.
all your bands that you were producing there at that time.
Yeah, that's how I did it before that. And before that, I didn't have any space. So what I would do is that anytime a band would contact me, I would ask them if they have a rehearsal space that we could use to record. And if they didn't, I would sometimes we would go to l'autre canal in Nancy. So we would use their room, and I would just bring all my stuff there, but it's not ideal. And but yeah, just before the studio, I had that rehearsal space that was fixed, and we had that for several years. So that was better than having nothing. But yeah, and that's the thing is that I did everything myself. I bought all my gear myself and all that. So I didn't have a vast amount of money starting, so I don't have a rich family or anything behind me. So so it wasn't very easy to start with. But yeah, the association with Clément has really helped a lot, and yeah, it's a really great partnership. So.
And specifically regarding Engram of Decline, do you remember a little bit how you worked on the record, like from the drum trackings to the mastering? Were there any things you specifically remember, or any things you would absolutely do differently by now, or things you were particularly happy about on that particular record?
I think it went pretty smoothly, but I think at the time we really didn't pay that much attention to the drum tuning. It was like, okay, let's set up the microphone, start record, and hope for the best. And because at that time I knew a lot about mixing, but I didn't necessarily know a lot. I mean, I knew like microphone positions and all that, but I didn't really know a lot about really drum tuning and all that. And that's a very, very important part. And I basically didn't know anything about it. And that's kind of the hard part when you're a sound engineer, but you're not a drummer at all, is that you kind of have to learn about that stuff. But it's a bit complicated. So often what I would do is like sometimes I see a really great video about drum tuning. I would send it to Clément and say, "Hey, watch that." And now what we do is that we try. Sometimes we try stuff together. Or he would tune his drums, and he would ask me how I think it sounds, and we would do that a few times. Sometimes we set up the microphones, and we hear how it sounds in the mic, and then because again, it's going to sound different in the microphone than what you hear in the room. But on the album, you're not going to hear how it sounds in the room. You're just going to hear what the microphone gets. So that's also very important. And so now we did a lot of trial and error. And I think what I used to do at the time is that, yeah, you set up microphones, everything seems to sound good, but that's it. And we didn't like spend a lot of time with trial and error. Basically, we just went for it. And one thing I don't know if it's on that recording, but I noticed sometimes that the snare drum tends to detune itself, and sometimes rather radically between the first song you record and the last song that you track. And and I think it took me I don't know if I did that, but now now I would compare the snare sound between each song and try to see how, especially like if that's song music on the blast beats and the hits, there's going to be more harmonics on a snare drum on the hits, and the stick will not hit precisely the same spot like the faster you go, right? That's natural. But if you have like a big if you like have big harmonics on the snare drum, it's going to be super noticeable, right? The sound will change. It's going to be da 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 da, and then if the snare is the snare drum is tuned a tiny bit different on another song, is going to sound completely different. And sometimes I would not understand why a song sounds different with the same presets on every track, but the drums sound different. And it's because the tuning has changed between two songs.
And I think Tini has a question related to that. Can it happen that the tuning for one song is not good for another song?
It can happen, but like the thing is, like with a band like Fractal Universal, there's like, I would say there's a fast part or a heavy part in almost every song, right? Every song is different, but it's very rare that there's one song that's completely smooth from beginning to end. There's always something. So I think we try to tuning that goes well for like mid-tempo and slower stuff, and something that goes well with blast beats and all that, because there's no real song that's, I guess maybe one example. No, that's no even. I was gonna say like maybe Decline, but no, actually there's blast beats in this one later in the song. Yeah. So even if it starts super slow and super heavy, you cannot have a snare drum that's tuned super low, because then the blast beats become almost unplayable and all that. So right now the trend is to have snare drums that are tuned super low, and honestly I love that sound, but you also have to think about the playability for the drummer and how it's going to sound with fast parts and all that. So we try to find a happy medium and stick to that. Now sometimes like there are bands with very distinct styles from one song to another. They just said they have a song that's like I had one band where like they had a song that was super 80s sounding, very new wave and all that. So we detuned the snare drum super low and lower than the rest of the album, I think. So yeah, that's the kind of stuff that can happen. But honestly, I like to have, if the music is not completely different from one track to another, I like to have a certain consistency overall. So yeah.
All right, but I think you can like treat the snare drum differently depending if it's like a really heavy halftime or blast beat. I guess you don't maybe apply the same treatment to the sound itself, but not in terms of tuning, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like sometimes, like if there's a really really heavy breakdown part, you can all of a sudden add a lot of reverb, and then quickly shut it off when there's a super fast part, because everything is going to be muddy. But stuff like that, and I still use drum replacement samples quite a bit, even if it's not noticeable. But I realized that it's not like I used to be kind of anti samples, but honestly, I realized that having a blend of both usually is really nice, and you can adjust the mix of both, and sometimes you can have more of one, more of the other, and you can kind of change the sound a tiny bit like that, and that's how I did on the Impassable Horizon. Like there are drum samples, they are very very low in the mix, but sometimes if I need a tiny bit more samples or making things sound a little bit different, I would adjust the faders from the natural sound and the samples.
All right. And speaking still about Engram of Decline, were there any things? Are you still happy about the record overall, or?
Yeah, I listened to it when we're when doing prep for for tonight. I listened to Rhizomes first, and then I listened back to Engram of Decline, and the first thing that popped to my ears comparing the two is that the snare drum has a lot more mids in Engram of Decline, and I was like, oh, that's a bit strange, but it's funny because the two albums to me they sound a bit similar. I would say Rhizomes is kind of sounds similar to Engram but better. To me it's kind of like the same thing but better. Like both albums have a very tight drum sound, and we try to have like very precise guitars and all that, and I think you can hear that on both records, but I think it's more fine-tuned on Rhizomes, and the Impassable Horizon we went a completely different direction, I think. But no, I still think it sounds good. Maybe it's a tiny bit too much compression. Things maybe don't breathe enough on Engram, but there are still parts, and when I listen to them, I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds good. But that's mostly the music, not necessarily. It's not necessarily because of me, but it's like because the music is really good too. So.
Ginny asks again, during live sessions, does the sound engineer apply the same effects that you apply during the recording? Well, I guess some of them are like common, like compression, reverb, EQing, and that stuff. But obviously, live you can't do as much stuff as you can do on an album, I think.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So right off the bat, I have to say I am not a live engineer, and I never made a live in my life, and I don't want to do it because I would probably ruin it. Because to me, it's really two different. I mean, obviously, there's a lot in common, but it's two different beasts, and I think it's a mistake. I think it's a mistake to treat the live as the same thing as a studio. Like, for example, sometimes there are bands and like they have only one guitar player, and like they would cut the rhythm guitars during a solo, and they're like, oh, because we only have one guitar. And I'm like, yeah, but it's the studio, live is different. And to me, I think it's you have to treat it differently, because a live is going to sound different no matter what. No matter what, the experience is going to be completely different. Like you're hearing music at 100 decibels in your face, so that is like completely different. Like the dynamics, so there's going to be a lot more dynamics, and yeah, you don't necessarily have to apply a ton of reverb because there's going to be already a lot of natural reverb in the room. I mean, depending on the venue and all that. But I think, yeah, you have to treat it as its own thing. And yeah, to me, it's like it's natural that the live sounds different than the studio. And I think, honestly, when a band, they play live and they play exactly the same as the studio, I'm almost a bit disappointed sometimes. Like sometimes I like for example, I like that you added like a few bars of rhythm section before the sax solos, because obviously you need the time to go grab your saxophone and all that. And I was so accustomed to listening the studio version over and over because when you mix it, you're you're sick of the songs when the album is done because you've listened to it 1,000 times. So when all of a sudden there's this, I was like, oh yeah, and I was like, oh yeah, they had to do this because because you have to go grab it. But it's like it's a nice change. So I like little surprises like that, and I mean, obviously, if there's a solo that's iconic, people want to hear that. So that's natural. But sometimes little touches like that, or making a medley of two different songs, or making song transitions that are not on the album. I think these are little touches that are really great during a live show. So yeah, to me, live is a different thing, and it should not be the same as a studio. And I think that when you're in studio, I don't think you should limit yourself thinking of the live setting. It's like, yeah, but if you can do some cool stuff with like 10 overdubbed guitars in the studio and you think it sounds really kick-ass, why not do it? It's like, yeah, well, for the live, you're gonna think about another solution. Maybe you're gonna use samples, or you're gonna play it differently, or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's exactly how I think about it also as a composer. Like there is the studio thing. I can add as many layers as I want, 10 guitars, 20 vocal harmonies, whatever. And then, when you think about the song for live purpose, it's a different thing. Exactly. You have to rearrange it, add some samples, decide what you play in between all of that. But I would definitely not limit myself for recording because it's different. It's just different to me.
Yeah. So, I don't know if the question was about really like technical stuff like compression, EQ, but usually during a live setting, you don't have time to do stuff that's super complicated. So most of it is a bit of compression. EQ is the most important thing, I think, and then add some delay and reverb on certain tracks. I think the live engineer's biggest job is paying attention to what happens on stage, and sometimes triggering delays over certain key parts and stuff like that. Like you have to pay attention to what's happening. But to me, it's a bit of a different job with a lot of commonality. Like you have the same base knowledge. If you know how an EQ works, it's going to be the same for both. But yeah.
I was thinking of the mix with raw sound and trigger sound. Okay. So,
okay. Well, yeah, I know. I'm gonna. I know that Simon, who is your live guy now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he also worked with my band. And he probably does the same thing with Fractal, but he used to do a mix. For example, on the kick drum, he would mix the natural sound with the trigger. Now in my band, we didn't have as many fast bars as Fractal, so maybe with you guys is using the sample predominantly. I don't know, but it's also
no. Actually, Clément hits pretty hard. He worked on it as well, but actually he uses just a little bit of trigger, and he balances it so it fits better on some parts. I think it's pretty close to what you would do on the album to make every part sound great and not have like a super triggered sound on like the very open parts, because that would just sound awful.
And it's there's your answer. Yeah, you can do that. The same thing live. It's funny because one time I saw Opeth live, and I think it was their first tour with their current drummer. So it was on the Ghost Reveries tour. I think Martin Lopez or Mendez. I never remember which is which. Their drummer, he just had quit the band, and so they had their new drummer. But I remember that the triggered sound was very loud, and I think that was only triggered. So during like I think they played a Face of Melinda, like the super smooth song, and I think during the first part he actually plays with brushes. But every kick drum would be like, and everything else was super smooth, and I was like, oh. And I was like, too bad. But I don't know. It was their first tour with that guy, so maybe they were still figuring things out. I don't want to trash Opeth. It's one of my favorite bands, but I don't know. I thought it was a little bit funny.
Yeah, actually, I've seen also in like more extreme kind of bands that the kick drum was mixed so loud and there was basically only trigger, and basically the only thing you could hear in the show was like, and you couldn't distinguish anything. So
yeah, and that's the thing. Sometimes you go and watch like huge bands live, and sometimes you're like, wow, their live sound is crappy, and on the album they have like some of the best sound because they all go to like the biggest studios and they can control everything. But yeah, when you're a band live, you can't really know how you sound because you're on stage. So I think they have to trust their engineer. And yeah, sometimes it's surprising, but yeah, it happens quite a few times that I've seen like huge bands live, and I was kind of disappointed in the sound. So yeah, you never know. But yeah, I know Simon does a great job, and because I've heard what he did before he joined Benighted Soul, and I've seen you guys. So yeah, it's he still does a good job. So
Yeah, he's a wizard, indeed. And we have a question from Baz. Well, thank you for your subtraction, by the way. Hugo and Vince, how about including a keyboard guy on the next Fractal Universe album? Well, actually, I think there is some keyboard played by you.
Definitely, I think we played most of them on Engram of Decline because
yeah, and it's funny because I was we took oh crap, I don't remember. So yeah, I'm sorry, I never remember the song names because I spent like months and months working on the songs.
Okay,
just
sing it.
And with the working titles, which are numbers. So right now I have a song opened on Cubase, which is named 57.
Okay.
That's the one you released, the first music video that you released, right?
the second one.
I think that's
second one. Oh shit!
Symmetrical Masquerade.
And I can't remember. Oh yeah, and I couldn't even remember the name. So on this one, I was listening back to the tracks and I realized that I snuck in something from my keyboard to on one of the piano part, like the dun dun dun.
Oh yeah.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, I doubled it with a kind of a crystalline, like 80s sound to brighten it up and help the piano pop out. And I was like, yeah, nobody noticed, but yeah. So yeah,
you told me.
but I sometimes I add stuff like that. But yeah, I always like when there's like a bit of ambience and stuff like that. Stuff that's that unexpected, because yeah, since you can do anything and everything with keyboards, it's always cool to have these little touches here and there, I think.
Yeah, and I think for Engram of Decline, you did like 100% of these keyboard sounds yourself. Later on, I started including some already myself, but I think on Engram you did basically all of them, if I remember correctly.
Oh yeah,
So
maybe
you have any knowledge at that time of that?
Yeah, I think you just gave me the MIDI tracks, and
Or sometimes you even learned the harmony on the spot. I remember we were at your place during the mixing process, and it was like, yeah, could you add some synth there? And you were like, yeah, let me just find the chords and find a suitable sound. And sometimes it happened like that also.
Yeah, it's funny. It's sometimes with bands, it's like I remember. I think it was with Slatcher. I think it was Jan who was playing a riff on the guitar, and on the spot, I played it back to him, and to him it was like kind of like a magic trick. And
okay.
yeah, it's a fun way to earn instant respect from from the band. It's like, whoa, dude! But it's like, when they're tuned in C, and you're like, okay, it's probably in C. So then you reconstruct with relative pitch. You're like, okay, he probably played that, and it's like, oh, bingo. So, but yeah, it's a fun way to all of a sudden, like, your the level of respect the band has for you jumps up, and it's like, hey, that guy knows what he's doing. That's funny.
I think the ending of Godless Machinist, there is some Rhodes sound piano playing. Is that you? You added this, I think?
It's both.
Yeah.
I think Vince sent me the Rhodes, and I was like, oh, it's nice, but maybe that Rhodes sound is a bit flat. So I took a nice. There's some really great Rhodes sounds on this little thing here, and
What are you using?
I
What is it?
I learned it, and I oh yeah, so this is a Korg Kronos Model 2, and yeah, it's a great keyboard. It's great for live playing, and yeah, there's some really kick-ass sounds. The Rhodes sounds are really, really great on that, and so yeah, I again, I was like, okay, am I gonna bother asking him the notes? And I was like, no, I'm gonna transcribe it. And I played it back, and I was like, I tried to be tight enough so that you don't hear double notes. And I was like, oh yeah, it sounds really great like that. But yeah, I was trying to be sneaky about it, but I was again just trying to make it sound a bit better. Nothing more. I'm never gonna try to say, hey guys, and add like a big like synth pad and a part that has nothing to do with that. But yeah.
And yeah, now talking maybe about Rhythms of Insanity, our second record. What did we do differently on that one? Well, first of all, we tracked the drums at another studio in Germany, Ghost City Recordings,
yeah.
if I recall correctly. And you weren't there, so you had to work with the tracks you received from the studio. So
Yeah.
what was your experience with that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's funny because I think it might have been the first time that I received tracks from like a professional recording studio, like a big studio dedicated to that. So, and my first surprise was that it was not far away from the quality that I can obtain myself. So I kind of felt better about myself. I was like, oh yeah, I mean, it did not sound bad or anything, but it's just like, it wasn't like there was like a massive difference. It was, a bit cleaner, maybe a bit better, but it was kind of similar. So I was like, yeah, maybe I can have the same quality, and yeah. The other thing that's funny is that the recording cabin at Clément's place was like built 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
So so you almost could have recorded there, but yeah, like the stars didn't align properly. But yeah, I think it was a great experience. I mean, for me, it was nice. It was a nice experience to have that and work with that. I don't know how it was for you guys recording there. I guess it was a lot more stressful to go to that place, and you have studio time that is booked, and you have a fixed time to do everything, and
well, we actually had too much time. We had one extra day where we shot some playthrough videos, but yeah, we didn't want to be that stressed, and Clément decided that we would take an extra day just in case, but everything went according to plan. So I think it was great, and we had already met the people before, so it went really, really smoothly, and I'm still happy about the recordings there. I think Clément is as well.
Yeah, and but yeah, so that was really interesting working with that. But yeah, I was almost expecting like the drums that sound almost like mix ready, But in that style of music, it's there's always quite a bit of work to do on the raw drums if you want to make them sound powerful and consistent and all that. So yeah, no, that was really really a good learning experience for me. I was like, okay, that's how they do, and yeah, I had a lot of fun. So yeah, I kind of used the same philosophy as Ngram, yeah, but better. I think the snare drum sounds better. The kick drum, on this one there is no drum replacement on the kick drum. I actually managed to like, the sound was clean enough and isolated enough from the rest that I could amplify the treble and the high frequencies on the kick and the attack to actually not use samples. I used samples on 2 riffs. Like, there was one super fast part, like I think at 250, and you could tell that Clément was kind of getting tired because the energy on the kick was slowly diminishing. But like, it must have been a nightmare to record. So it's like, but it was, in terms of timing, it was super tight. But it's like, it's one of those things. It's almost impossible to record at full energy. So for that, I used a bit of replacement, and I tried to make it transparent enough that you don't notice that all of a sudden there's a sample. So you don't realize that at all. So it was like, kind of like a personal achievement. It's like, yeah, I made a tech death metal album without using a kick sample. But yeah, I think on this one we so on the first album, I remember we used your for the guitars. You played on an Engel Parable at the time, right?
Yeah, correct. So we used this here on Ngram, and it was a blend.
Yeah.
Do you remember with what?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because it's a blend of so the actual amp that we reamped with SM57, very standard practice, but it works, so whatever. And sorry, and an amp simulation. That's a freeware from like 10 years ago, and I don't know. For some reason, I love it. I think it sounds great, and it's funny because I had an American guitar player who also plays in a prog tech death band, who contacted me, and he wanted to know. He absolutely wanted to know what was the secret behind the guitar sound of Rhizomes of Insanity. And I told him, well, it's a Engel Parable and a freeware plugin from a Canadian guy called Le Pou.
Yeah,
and he was like, he was like, no way. He's like, I never managed to make it sound great. But it's important to point out that these are just amp simulation. So you need to add a cab simulation, and the cab is it's basically as important as the amp. Like, you can have the best amp in the world, if your cab is crap, it's not going to sound good. And I learned that very early when I tracked a guitar player from one of my old bands, and he had an old cab that was an old piece of crap. And when we changed cabs, it was day and night. I was like, okay, I realized how much of an impact it has. So yeah, it's very, very important. And when you change cabs, you can really completely change the sound of the guitar. I mean, nowadays it's easy to realize because you can have like whole simulation suite where you have the amp, the cab, and you can change everything in one click, and you can really realize how different it is. But yeah, that was a blend of that. And the way I did it was that I used your Parable to get like the meat of the sound, like, and the big chug during the palm mutes and stuff like that, and with really a lot of distortion, maybe a tiny bit too much sometimes. And I use the other sound to get really the precision. And it's a sound that's almost crunchy, but had a ton of compression to make up for the fact that it has less distortion. Because if you have less distortion, you're going to have less sustain. Like during long notes, the sound is going to fade out quicker, because the distortion amplifies your sound by 1,000 or whatever. So if you want to have sustain during but have a sound that has less distortion, a great trick is to use compression before you go to the amp, and that way you can have a sound that you can really control the amount of distortion that you want, but you can still have a lot of sustain. So and that's how we did it. And yeah, because with a band like you, it's because most of the rhythmics are really complicated. It's not just you have like some very fast rhythm stuff, and so it needs to be precise. And if you use too much distortion, it's gonna be like, I think a constant thing we always did with Fractal is like really try to, even during the part that are really fast and really complicated, make it so that you can really understand what's happening. And I think it's really important for you, and that's what I try to transcribe in the mix, is have everything be understandable and not everything be like a soup.
Yeah, I see. We have to hear the notes here.
What?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I didn't.
I totally agree. Sorry.
Okay. No, sorry.
It has to be extra clear. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, sometimes like I like bands where the mixing is kind of messy. I like Strapping Young Lad, but that's not a mixing style that would fit you at all.
Yeah.
It's like two different things completely. But and that's the thing. It's like I always try to adapt to what the band is trying to do. So if I was mixing an industrial band, I would go for a sound that's more distorted and more messy. But obviously with Fractal Universe, it's not at all what would suit the music the best.
And apart from the things we mentioned, was there anything you did differently on Rhizomes? You said it was kind of a similar approach.
Yeah, it was a similar approach. Like there were a bit more clean vocals on this one compared to Engram. And yeah, it really went. You really went all in on that one, especially on Impassable Horizon. But no, I think I just tried to use the same things that worked on Engram and keep what worked, and the other stuff that wasn't as good, like some of the drums sound weren't really great, so I tried to change that. Like I said, mainly the snare drum mixing. But yeah, I tried to keep the same philosophy overall. It's funny, I think I kept doing the same thing for the bass since the first album, and I still did that on an Impassable Horizon, and which is using the DI and using one track, which is the DI completely clean with only the low frequencies, and compressing that a ton to have the low frequency, the low range that's very constant, and using another track with the mids that are a bit distorted and compressed to add a bit of grit and make it so that you can really understand the notes. And what's funny with that is that, when you try this kind of tricks, you really never know, okay, is it really the quote-unquote right thing to do? Is it the thing that the pros are doing? Like, is what I'm doing completely legit? or is it like just a trick? But then I saw a video from Christian Kohle, and he was doing exactly that. So I was kind of vindicated. I was like, yes, I was doing it right from day one. And, it tells you that sometimes you need a bit of confidence, like, yeah, if what you're doing sounds right, then it's probably the right thing. But yeah, sometimes I lack the confidence. I'm like, I could have done that video before he did. But yeah. But no, I don't think I use like any particular trick. Well, I mean, the trick that I do on a kick drum, for example, to be able to not having to use a sample on the kick is I would kind of like with the bass, I would duplicate one of the kick tracks. There were two kick tracks. There was a microphone that was outside. I don't remember if it was a D6 from Audix or if it was a Shure. And there was a Beta 91, a Shure inside the drum, which is, again, pretty standard. That's also what I do nowadays. And I would duplicate one of the tracks, and I would just keep the high frequency, and I would distort it. But distort it like I would use like a guitar amp, like to use extreme distortion. And I would of course gate it to just have the hits, very short hits, and it has kind of a dirty on every hit, and that's kind of how I do to have a. It's almost like having a triggered sample, except it just uses the natural kick drum track. And the good thing is that you don't have to program anything. You don't have to have a MIDI track controlling the kick samples, because using samples, it's you're also making your life more complicated. If you cannot use samples, then it's a bit easier. But that's a trick I still regularly use, and I kind of came up with it. So I don't know. Maybe I should do a video about it before some other big sound engineer does it on YouTube.
And now coming over to the Impossible Horizon. This was the first record where we tracked the drums in the studio in Boundless Productions. And I think that was very comfortable for Clément and also for you, I think, because we had a lot of time to try out stuff. And I think that was the first big improvement on that record. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, completely. And so it's funny because when you tracked Rhizomes, that like the studio was finished just after that. So we started working in the studio with Clément. So by the time came the time to record, to track Impossible Horizon, we had spent almost 2 years working in that environment. So it's not like it's not like our studio was just built. So we already had a bit of experience, and that time, that's where we spent some time looking at tuning techniques and what we could do to improve the drum sounds, and what tuning would fit best and all that. And we really tried to go with a drum tuning that was less, that was lower, and that was a bit bigger naturally. And I think you can hear that the drums they sound a bit bigger and more natural on Impossible Horizon. They feel a bit less, tight and compressed, and I don't know. It kind of has a sense of space, maybe almost a bit more, and that's a direct result of having been able to work a bit more like that, and in a more relaxed atmosphere, where it's like, okay, we have the time to do whatever we want. If we make a mistake, it's not a big deal. We are at our place, so we can really have like full control and no stress. Which and especially when you consider like the crazy parts he had to play, I think it was important for him to to not have like that sword over his head.
Yeah, absolutely. And we even took time to like try out different cymbal sets, because he just had got his endorsement at the time, and they sent him over tons of stuff that we were able to like do test recordings with and everything. So it was really comfortable, I think.
Oh yeah, we even tried. Yeah, we that's true. I almost forgot that detail. Yeah, we tried 3 different cymbal sets, and I remember listening, comparing them over and over and over again, and we tried to go for cymbals that were less aggressive, so that the relative sound of the drum shells and the cymbals, so that the so that the toms, the snare, and the kick drum were louder in the room, and which is what you should do. And because that's the same thing. I stumbled upon a video. Well, I think it was Christian Kohler again, and he pointed out that cymbal retailers, they will try to sell you the loudest cymbal possible for metal drummers, which is the opposite of what you should do, because what you want to hear loud is the snare and the toms and all that, and the cymbals, naturally, they're already super loud. They're already like hurting your ears almost, like when you're rehearsing. Like when you're rehearsing in a small space with a drum kit, after 2 hours, it's like.
Yeah, and even on stage, I mean, like we always use like some attenuation on the cymbals because it just sounds way too aggressive in most venues. And Simon told us exactly the same thing. Why aren't there any brands constructing cymbals that sound good but not extremely loud? Like, there's definitely a market there.
Yeah, I think so. Well, maybe we should start a metal cymbal brand. I think we need to do that, and we need to invent a thing that ties your cables back together, because at the end of each recording session we spent an hour unplugging all the cables, and we're like, why didn't anyone invent something? And every time we said, well, there should be a market for that.
Definitely.
It's like the live samples that can output a click track and a stereo track in front of the venue. But I think a brand started doing that.
Oh, yeah.
Because every time you need to use like a big ass multi-sample that is like way too complicated for what you want to do, which is just play a track and have like a few click tracks and one stereo track for the samples. But so the recording of the Impossible Horizon, that was really great. And like some drum parts, like watch the end of that song was like there's like an uninterrupted sequence of 16th notes on the snare and the toms and on everything on the drums for like 2 minutes.
Falls of the earth.
Like this one was a kind of a head scratcher to mix, and it's like, okay, how can I do that? But it's always interesting to have like, as a writer, you probably like, you're scratching your head as to how can I come up with new stuff, and it's like, I was like, oh, that part, that's very original. But then it was like, okay, how am I gonna mix it? So it's always fun to have like that kind of challenges. So here I definitely, and especially since like he's hitting the cymbal on his right, and then he's hitting the floor tom on his right. So the floor tom has a ton of bleed from the cymbal, which is not usually something that happens. But here, because of the way the part was written, I had to find solutions to get around that. So there was definitely a lot of like problem solving on that album that you don't think about it, but when you listen to it, but because some of the parts were some riffs were so unique, I had to come up with I obviously couldn't. I had to mute the high frequency because there was so much bleed in the cymbals. But at the same time, I realized, you know what? You don't need to hear every hit. You get the gist of it. It's almost like in an orchestra when you when there's a player playing like what's the timbal, and so it was kind of that feel. So
it's more like a rumble, a constant rumble.
Exactly. So if I wanted to have like every hit distinct like the rest of the song, you would have a ton of cymbals and it would have sounded really bad. So I was like, how, it's like understanding what the feel of the song should be in that moment. And it makes me think what was it on Engram? Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm mixing up the first two albums. It's kind of a blur in my memory. The one was like there's a very chaotic part with the saxophone, like and like the drums.
Engram, I think. Collective.
It was
From
Engram.
the end of Collective Engram, from Engram.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, it was on the first one. Yeah, that was also kind of a challenge, and I had to basically. So in my in your mix, like the drum tracks take a huge amount of space because there's like all the tracks for the toms, the kick, the snare, all the group tracks, and the sends, the reverb for the snare and all that. I had to duplicate all that because there was basically two drum tracks playing at the same time during that part. So yeah, that was that was also kind of like hard to figure out, but yeah, in the end it was really cool sounding.
Yeah, it really flows in the end. It's really natural, actually. So great job.
Yeah. Oh, one thing we didn't talk about that was also really fun to do was finding all the samples with the tribal parts, kind of like the tribal chant around the fire, that kind of ambience, and with the float singing. That was also really cool. And that was on Engram too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you use some free sample libraries, right?
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. A website that I love for that is freesound.org, and there's a ton of free samples that basically anyone can upload, and any people with like a Zoom microphone or any portable microphone can record, and there's all the types of samples in the world you want. And I think that the nah, like that kind of tribal chant, it was actually a supporter chant. Like
From Italy, I think.
Yeah, it was football supporters that were chanting, yeah, probably drunk, but it's like you put that in the right in the right atmosphere, and yeah, it sounds like almost like a shamanistic chant and all. So
did you know?
I'm sorry if I'm completely breaking the mystique of the album.
for that sample, some people actually asked me if they thought the people screaming were shouting fractal, fractal, fractal. Actually, it's totally not the case.
No, but, a bit like that,
yeah. So, some people asked me if that was that.
Yeah, no, it's a total coincidence. I think they shout something like bang, yeah, bang, or something like that, which I don't know, might be an offensive word in Italian. I don't know, but
maybe the name of the football player.
It's something like that. Yeah, but yeah, that just shows you how diverse and how many stuff there's on the albums that I keep remembering. Oh yeah, there's this and there's that. But
and someone asks us, only Tash asks us, what's the most bizarre sample you've ever mixed? Probably this one, or if anything even more bizarre.
It's probably this one, yeah. I for another band that I mixed, these guys.
Yeah.
I used a quote from The Lord of the Rings, and it's Saruman. And because Christopher Lee has a huge bass voice, I wanted to put it super loud in the mix, and they were like, copyright. So I was like, oh, okay. So I had to put it really low in the mix, and I was like, too bad. But
that's a nice Easter egg.
Maybe it would have been a little bit too cheesy to have it super loud. But yeah, Christopher Lee did make a metal album, but with the guys from Rhapsody, I think.
Yeah, and he did his own later called Charlemagne.
Yeah, that's the one. Oh yeah, but maybe it was with different musicians.
For my previous band, Sledger, during one song we needed some war sounds, and I think I did ask you to put a Wilhelm scream in the middle of it. I don't know if you remember.
Oh no, I don't.
on the intro of the album.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, there is a small Wilhelm scream.
Oh shit! I should listen to it again. Well, it's funny because I've become absolutely sick of that sample. Because
Well,
every director that wants to be hip and funny is like, haha, I'm gonna put a Wilhelm scream. But because everyone does it, it's
it was
it's a bit tired. And now I'm like,
that's
please.
overused joke maybe, yeah. But it was almost 10 years ago, so yeah.
Yeah, so you have a pass. But so yeah, they had. But the cool thing they did with that sample is that it's when Christopher Lee says, when Saruman says tens of thousands, and then you hear the marching of the band. Dun, dun, you hear the footsteps.
Yeah.
And the next riff they did is synchronized to that tempo. So yeah, it sounds really badass. And I was like, yeah, that's really cool. But yeah, it's too bad that because of copyright, you kind of have to put it in the background and and make it last less than 10 seconds. Otherwise, the bot is everywhere you upload that, it's going to be claimed for copyright.
That's an amazing way to advertise the album. I think I had to check that out.
Yeah.
I will.
Oh yeah, it's a really cool album. I really like working with them, and Clément played the drums on it. So
indeed,
yeah, that's the thing too. Is that at the studio, because Clément has that space, he can very often do recording sessions for bands, and because good metal drummers, they are in high demand, and he's obviously very good. So yeah, we often do sessions for other bands. So yeah, he's played on quite a number of metal albums.
Yeah, definitely. Just coming back to the Impossible Horizon, I think the other big thing that we improved on this one was vocal production overall, because you really challenged me to do like a quad tracking on every single vocal line, and I think the result is great. In the beginning, I was like, "Oh no, please don't make me do that."
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
And I think you also want to show it's the Cubase project for a song from the record, right?
Yep.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, I have it here. So unfortunately, I do not have the vocals on this project, but because the songs, honestly, I have very rarely done that in the past. But this album was so huge that I had to split the instruments and the vocals. Both because, yeah, I tortured you and asked you to to record every line 4 times. And the thing is, when I asked you that, I didn't realize there were going to be so many, because in the past, they were mainly like, lead vocals, and when they were clean vocals, it would mainly be one melody and maybe 2 or 3 harmonies tops. And this, you went for like 10 voices of harmony. So instead of doing 3 tracks, you had to do 40 all of a sudden. So I didn't really realize that at first. And then I was like, open the archive you sent me. And I was like, wait, why is there 120 tracks? It's like, okay, so I'm going to have to split it in 2 projects. But yeah, I think a big step up on this album was like, yeah, the vocals and the clean vocals. And I think it really adds a lot. Like, I think, yeah, Rhizomes is kind of a continuity of Engram. And to me, there's like a really big step up on Impossible Horizon on that front. And the mixing is also very different. So I think it helps really make that album unique. So yeah, I have the I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
I have the Cubase open here. So you can see these the tracks in pink, violet here. These are just the drums.
Yeah.
And in yellow it's the bass. In orange it's the rhythm guitars. And yep, more rhythm guitars. and and these are the lead guitars, and there's a solo. I think that's from Vince. Yes, it is. And finally, a bit of synths here, and yeah, this track was the guide track that you did. The demo you recorded basically. So I had kind of a guide as to how you wanted it to sound, more or less, and that's amount to 95 tracks just for the instruments. And I think this is this is not the most complicated song, so
Not bad.
I guess it gives you an idea of the amount of work that this album represented. And so if we can play maybe a bit of it. So wait, I'm just gonna check that I have this thing deactivated. Yes.
Cyril in the chat asked if we can hear just a bit of the guide track, of the demo track, maybe to hear the difference between the demo and the final product. If you're okay with this, Vince, of course.
Yeah, sure. That will be painful.
So I'm just gonna play a little bit. Well, I mean, I guess people know how the song sounds, but I'm gonna play it because this is the mixed version without mastering, so it's probably a bit different from what you're used to. Here we go. All right, you can hear the reverb.
Yeah.
When I play stuff. And so the playback, there's no drums in it. There's only the guitars and bass, but I can isolate it with the drums, like that, for example. I mean, it doesn't sound bad at all. The thing is, it almost sounds like it's mastered. Because the thing is, this is a raw mix. So in the master, I added more high frequencies and all that. So this sounds, so if this was going to go in the master, it would be, there would be way too high, way too much low frequencies and high frequencies. So that's the thing you have to keep in mind. Because yeah, the mix is has a ton of medium frequencies. But those medium frequencies are really what helps, like understanding all the notes and all that, and having something that is really clear. So, yeah, the drum tracks. So you can see here is my special tracks that's distorted to add a bit of a higher frequency that I've named high. So I used the microphone that's outside the kick drum because the one inside has a bit too much bleed, so it would pick up a bit too much of
The one inside has more bleed than the one outside.
Yeah, it's kind of strange, but I think it's because I was surprised at first when I realized that. I think it's because there is a direct line between the snare drum that goes through the batter skin, where the batter head is, and it goes through that. The line is not the line does not go through the shell of the snare drum. It goes through the skin because the snare is not directly above the kick drum. It's so I was surprised, but I realized, yeah, it kind of makes sense. So the one outside the kick drum, it's further away, and there's a shell kind of in between the line that goes through the snare drum and to the mic. So yeah, the microphone inside the kick sounds really good. Here. As you can hear, there's a surprising amount of bleed,
Yeah.
but But because it's covered by the overheads and everything else, it doesn't really matter. And when you put like yeah, you can hear in this one there's much less bleed. And it has a sound that's more scooped. And the higher frequency, so it sounds really dirty. But when you mix that with everything, it kind of has like dirty attack that works well. And even if there's a little bit of bleed or stuff like that, if it's covered by everything else, it's not really a problem. So oops, if I solo the drums. So as you can hear, there's a very generous amount of reverb. But once you put all the instruments, all of a sudden, you don't really hear it that much. So that's why during the slow parts, I like to add a bit of reverb and stuff like that. And I think that's also a big difference. Like the, I think Angram and Rhizomes, they tend to sound a bit dry, maybe. And yeah, I think I try to add a bit of ambience, especially on the drums and all that. Which I guess is fitting considering where you shot the music video.
Tini is asking if we can increase the volume, or are you still already at maximum for that?
Yeah, it's a bit tricky because I don't really, because of the way I'm sending the thing to Hugo, I have a limiter here. But if I increase it, it's going to squash the mix a little bit too much, maybe. So I can increase it again, but I realized I forgot something. When I mix, I also have this that's constantly on. So that's why it sounded a bit too medium. Yeah, that's better. So that is the real, quote unquote, raw mix.
Yeah, was that Sunworks? That's it?
No, so well, Sunworks is well, it's interesting that you asked that, but it's a bit different, but it's also worth mentioning. I deactivated it because it's something that will correct the sound for my setup. So I think, Vince, you also have that at home. And yeah, it's a really, really great tool. So basically, when you buy that, you have a software and a measurements microphone. And so what you do is that you you have your speakers, right? And you positioning the reference microphone, and they're gonna ask you, like, it lasts for like 15 minutes. It's going to play sounds through your speakers, and you measure it with your microphone. And after it has taken like a ton of measurements, it will basically measure how your room sounds and how your speaker sounds, because the sound you have anywhere is never neutral, right? Even in the best like recording studio in the world, even there, it's never completely neutral. So in order to have something that's as neutral as possible, the thing will measure how your room sounds and how your speaker sounds, and it will correct it. And so, when I mix on my speakers, I always have that thing turned on.
Yeah.
Oops, it's just an update. And yeah, you can see, like, at home, I have like I have a little bit of peak here, and yeah. So which means that when I listen at home without correction, I would have too much frequency in that area.
Actually, we can't see the EQ.
Oh yeah,
I think
we can.
I just realized.
Oh, I realized I realized that I'm sharing Cubase, but I'm not sharing. Yeah,
only Cubase.
yeah.
Sorry.
I realized that when I was talking, I was like, wait, they must not see anything.
Oh yeah, there is
But
a
yeah,
peak here in the drum signal. Yeah, great.
But I'm not. I'm not activating it because I want to output a neutral sound
of
for
course.
everyone at home.
Of course.
This the one thing I was activating. It's so I guess you cannot see here when I open the window.
Yeah, there is a EQ box here.
Oh, okay.
An EQ
Okay.
window.
Oh, that's strange. Yeah, Sonarworks doesn't, but this one does. Okay. And it's just a trick that's honestly. So I saw Nolly use it, and because of that, everyone uses it because everyone watches Nolly. But I mean, he's a great teacher, and I think he's. I'm sorry if my lights are yellow a little bit, so.
Okay.
As the sun goes down, my my screen goes more and more yellow. But one conundrum I had to fight for years and years and years was that when you mix something and you listen to the raw mix, it's going to be way different once it's mastered and once you put it into mastering. And I struggle with that a lot. And what I used to do was I would actually put a complete mastering plugin on my stereo out so that I would mix with a sound that was kind of mastered, with compression and EQ and limiter and all that. Okay. To have to have an idea of how it would sound once it's mastered, because it would change how you perceive everything. And sometimes you master it and you're like, oh shit, I have to go back to the mixing stage and do corrections, re-export it again and master it again. And but that little trick just consists of adding a bit of boost in the lower range and in the treble, in the high frequencies, and just rolling off some of the sub frequencies that usually you don't really need. Okay. And during the mastering, usually mastering involves boosting a lot of those frequencies. So if you do it already at the mixing stage, your raw tracks will already sound closer to what it should sound once you've mastered something. So it really helps. So when I saw him doing that, it spoke to me on a on a spiritual level. It was almost an epiphany. It was like, oh my God, yes, exactly. That's what I need to do. So, it's not because you see a big sound engineer doing something that you should do the same thing. But when I saw him doing that, I was like, yes, that is exactly what I need, because it solves something that I was struggling with for years. And because, if you put the complete mastering plugin, Ozone or something else, it's not necessarily, maybe it's going to do a little bit too much treatment, and it's going to modify the dynamics and all that. And it's not going to be reflective of the actual master that you're going to do, or the actual master that a mastering engineer is going to do later if you choose to send it to a master. But just doing that, just tweaking the EQ, it's not going to ruin your dynamics, but it's going to sound much closer to the final product. So I found it really helpful during the mixing stage. And I think it's something that I learned in between Rhizomes and Impassable Horizon, I think.
Okay.
But it kind of changed my life.
That's pretty obvious, but it has to be. Someone had to think about it. But thank you for the trick.
Yeah, it's it's really something that it's not because sometimes you see engineers tell you oh, you should do that, or hey, here's a trick to do that. If it doesn't speak to you, if you don't think it helps you, whatever, it's you don't need to follow what anyone says. And there are really a ton of different ways to do the same thing. So it's not because you do something different then it's necessarily wrong. But in that case, it was exactly what I needed. So I was like, oh, cool. I'm going to steal that and and do that. I mean, it's here for that, That's why they share their knowledge. And especially nowadays compared to when I started, like, I don't know, 13, 14 years ago, there is so much more stuff now on YouTube and anywhere. I remember when I started, the main source of knowledge for mixing was the Andy Sneap forum. So Andy Sneap was like a guy that at the time he was mainly known for mixing Arch Enemy and Nevermore, and he had a pretty active forum. And yeah, I learned a lot of stuff on his forum. And but yeah, nowadays you have like really tons of great sound engineers sharing their knowledge. So yeah, it's a great time to to be a mixing engineer.
Yeah, you can find a tutorial for basically anything nowadays, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it goes for the same for guitars or whatever. Now you can find, and I think you can definitely see that the overall level of playing any instrument has just skyrocketed, because like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you have a guy like Yngwie Malmsteen come out of nowhere and it's like an alien because no one's playing like him, But because so few people had that knowledge and that level of playing, or you had to buy an obscure instructional video on VHS or something in the 90s. But nowadays it's like, there's this almost collective knowledge of stuff that you can freely access. It's almost too much, but but yeah, it's really great. Like, you want to know anything about anything, you can have it. And yeah, it's a great time. But yeah, the thing is, there's also so much more competition nowadays because of that.
Yeah.
But I mean, music is not a competition. And when I was younger, I was always feeling a bit embarrassed when I saw people that were much better than me. And with maturity, you're like, yeah, it doesn't matter. You do your thing, and you have something else that no one else has. And I think it's true for everyone. Like for example, I think what's really cool is that Vince's solos are really, you can really like. When there's a guitar solo on this album, and also something that's very different is that Hugo has done more solos on this one.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because you can really hear the difference between your styles, And yeah, I think it really adds a great touch to have you both more sharing that space. And it's really interesting. Like, it's almost like playing the game of who played what. But yeah, I think you really have your distinctive styles, and that's really cool, I think.
Well, cool. Thank you. It's good to know.
Well, just coming back to the Cubase project, maybe you can show us a little bit about the tricks you mentioned regarding bass and maybe guitars, like the blend of the different sounds.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, if we go to the bass. So, big fat sound. And so I have this low track. So you can hear that basically, like, yeah, everything above 240 hertz is muted. And I compressed the crap out of it. Oops, sorry. So it has a very constant rumble sound, and it's like you have this low frequency that's really consistent no matter what he plays. And I think that's important for when you have riffs like that, especially like you have octaves that ding 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 ding, And so to me, every note needs to have that same power. So it's really great to have that. And for and to understand the notes, I have that. So yeah, what I call growl here. And so you can hear that you don't really hear the bass frequencies at all. But it's in order not to mess with the other track, right? Not in order not to have any phase problems or stuff like that. And there's yet another one that's even more distorted. So this one is especially for the attack, like you can hear the pick sounds. And it has a bit of that metallic sound that I mean, I personally like. So and yeah, that's it. So yeah, but the most important one are these two tracks. And yeah, it's basically the same method that I've refined over the years. So here I would yeah, compress that. I would add, oops, I think Cubase is running out of memory, so it has trouble showing me the, oh, now it crashed.
Oh, great.
Oh. Yeah, that's, this is live, that's proof. But yeah, so you got the gist of it. Yeah, it's just like, that project is so big that Cubase running that plus Discord and all that, it was a bit too much for for him.
Yeah, it happens.
Did you ask Val to play with a pick? I didn't ask him anything. I was just sent the track. I think he did both, but mostly with a pick, right?
Yeah, actually, like on the past records, it was already with a pick for most of it. He played with the fingers on like the softer parts and stuff like that. And actually, he started using the pick more live as well recently. And I think it was mainly Simon there who convinced him to do that because yeah, with a pick you just have more of the attack and like a sound that maybe fits with distorted guitars more. So this is why I think we went more and more with that approach.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. I didn't know that.
I think live now he's switching also between pick and finger from time to time. I don't know exactly how he manages to do that, but it seems to work pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. Usually in metal, it's nice to play with a pick. I mean, you can play with fingerstyle, and you can have a ton of attack, but it really requires quite a bit of practice, and you need to really hit the strings very hard. When you listen to Geddy Lee, for example, he has a sound with a ton of attack, but that's because he hits the strings super hard. And yeah, and I mean he plays with fingerstyle exclusively, I think. So, but usually, yeah, it's better to play with a pick just for the sound because you're gonna get a tiny bit more of attack. In studio, it's not a problem, I think, because you can manipulate the sound so much that it's not that big of a deal. But I think, yeah, live, for the big riffs and all the parts that are unison with the rhythm guitar, it's better anyways. Yeah. But yeah, June there was, yeah, I'm sorry, before I could Cubase crashed, but people noticed there was another bass track that was above the three that I mentioned, and it was, I think, during a quieter part when he played with fingers.
Yeah, that's it.
And yeah, on those ones, I would do yet another separate track for the quieter parts because I don't want. Sometimes I could use that low compressed track, but it would be a bit too much. And yeah, sometimes if I want something that's less compressed and let breathe the higher frequencies a bit more and have no distortion at all, I'm going to add yet another bass track for those quieter parts. So yeah.
And Tini, you were mentioning the sound on the Veeps live show. Yeah, on this one, it's mostly his Darkglass pedal, I think, that we didn't use on the record, although we could have. But yeah, they're great sounding pedals. They have quite these characteristics you showed us in your bass sound. That really mid-rangey tone with a lot of attack. And I think you told me you would have loved to use the Darkless pedal also on the record if you had known that he had one.
Yeah, because I've seen while talking about videos and stuff. I saw a few videos of engineers using that, and I was really impressed with how it sounds. It's funny because since then I got my hands on a Darkglass pedal plugin, and I mean it probably doesn't sound exactly as good as the real thing, but it sounds really good, and if I if I had known that, I would have already did. I would have reamped through the pedal for the distorted sound, maybe.
All right. Are you able to relaunch the Cubase, or will it? Is there a bigger issue?
Yeah, no, I'm just waiting on it. I think it's in a few minutes. Well, okay, right. Mixcube, open. Okay.
Yeah, I think Darkglass is becoming more and more popular. I see more and more bass players using it, but I think it's for a good reason. It's really just also plug and play. You have like your very small pedal. You can basically only use that. You don't even need a cab or anything, and it sounds great. You can put it through a cab, I believe, as well, but you don't need to. So you basically can have your very small pedal straight to the PA and go for it. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, I think they started by at first they were building bass amps, right? And they made the pedal, and afterwards they made the pedal, and it's so good that people sometimes they just use the pedal without the amp at all.
Yeah, I think so.
It's like Kemper. I think it's also used more and more. I mean, for quite some time now. But one time my band opened for Cradle of Filth for 2 gigs in France, and I was really impressed with their new guitar player's sound. And so after the gig, I asked him what he was playing on, and it was on a Kemper.
Oh yeah.
And it's like nowadays it's like you can do so much stuff with that it's most bands find it not worthy to use a cabin speaker and amp on the road because it's like it's so heavy, and when you don't have roadies, you're killing your back.
And so also you depend on the microphone placement and all of that, and that has proven to be really a problem in the past when you do like your sound check in the afternoon. Then maybe 3 or 4 bands go on stage, and maybe someone moves with microphone and everything, and your sound check was basically for nothing if your mic has moved and stuff. So that drove us crazy. I remember we started a show, and Hugo's mic was like 20 centimeters or like even more away from the cab, and we didn't understand why the sound was horrible. And basically, someone had moved the mic, and yeah. And this doesn't happen anymore with Kemper.
Oh yeah, and we just have an amp and a cab. Like there are bands that are like, "Whoa, you're playing on whatever? Can I borrow it?" And it's like,
yeah,
and it's kind of mean. But if unfortunately you say yes, you're usually in for trouble. So sometimes you kind of have to be an asshole. But yeah, that's true. It's like, life conditions, it's so like the tiniest thing can go wrong. Yeah, it's better to really have things that are stable and all that. And when you can control everything, because when you don't have a crew, especially at our levels, when we're touring and all that, it's like, it's better to have big control of everything. It's like, you made your sound, you know how it sounds, and you know that preset, it's going to sound that way in the PA, and it's also so much more practical. Yes, so Cubase is ready. Oh, I need to share the screen again. Sorry.
Yeah, so maybe you can just have a look at the guitar sound as well. You mentioned like blending two different sounds. I think you used the same approach on this record. Only this time, one of the sounds was from our camper, right?
Yes. So whoop, here it is. So do you have that, Hugo?
I have the image.
Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna play the sound.
And I have the sound.
Okay. So yeah, as you can see, this is the camper. So yeah, the funny thing is that you can hear a tiny little bit of hum.
Oh.
Because nowadays, but nowadays most simulations, they will be so faithful that they will recreate the buzz and the hums that you get on a real amp. So that's that's a funny detail, but so on this I only did a bit of EQ. So I know the EQ is going to look really, really strange, but there's a reason for that. So here it is. So as you can see, like there's it has like a big scoop in the middle, and I amplified quite a bit some of the treble, and except some frequencies that I found to be a bit tiring after a while. And so this is based off your live sound, right? We use the sound that you used live at the time.
Yeah, kind of.
But yeah, so it has quite a bit more mids. So if I play it without the EQ that I've made, so yeah, you can hear it as, but it lacks a bit of bite, but I can understand why it's why you use that live, because yeah, when you're like having like 90 dB of guitars in the face, you don't want something with too much treble and all that. And I guess Simon is doing some EQ of his own, depending on the venue and all that.
Exactly.
But for a studio setting, what I did is the reason why it looks so weird is because I used a guitar sound that I really liked, and I can't remember which band it was, but it was a band that was not too far away stylistically from Fractal. And I did, what is called an EQ match. And so the plugin would compare the two frequencies, and it would automatically. So it's not perfect at all, and most of the time, just this thing you have it's kind of off a lot. But I use that as a base, a starting point, and then I tweaked it until I really wanted what I have. So because like when you EQ something way differently than it is, it's always give you interesting ideas. So you should never hesitate to do like some crazy stuff, right? Like you should not hesitate. Like if you think, oh, maybe this has too much mids, like like do something really huge like that. So it doesn't sound good but you might say, okay, maybe there's something interesting here. So maybe try this, maybe tweak it a little bit, maybe do it differently on whatever. So I always encourage people to really try to go crazy with it and try different sounds, because just with EQ, especially in guitars, you can achieve a lot of different results. But yeah, that's what I went with. And speaking of Andy Sneap, here's a trick that I learned on his forum like 15 years ago, and that I still use to this day.
Yeah.
And it's using a multi-band compressor, and I'm just going to use a single band here. And it's basically the frequency that corresponds to, it's where you're going to have a ton of bass during the palm mutes. Like you can see when during the open notes or the notes that are not muted, it's not doing much of anything. But as soon as there's a do-dong, do-dong, because and that helps having the palm mute not be too overwhelming and have too much bass and be too muddy. Because what you could do is just EQ that down, but if you EQ that down, then what happens is that the whole sound is going to have not much bass all throughout, and what you want to do is it's basically like a dynamic EQ. You're just going to remove that bit of bass just when it got too much low frequency during these low mids, I should say, maybe.
Yeah.
During the palm mutes. And that's a trick he used. He was the first one to use, and I think it has spread all throughout the sound engineering community. So, but it's really helpful because if you just EQ that down, because you're like, oh, the palm mutes they're too overbearing, but then but then your guitar sound is gonna be too thin all throughout every note, every part, and you just want to remove that during the palm mutes. So so we have that sound, right? And on top of that, we have that sound. So like I mentioned, it's a sound that's very crunchy. So I didn't use the same amp sim, but it's exactly the same philosophy. It's using a sound that's more crunchy with a more attack. And a bit more definition. And if we compare that with the Kemper, you can hear that the palm mutes are way more powerful here. But that sound, it helps kind of like the guitar pierce through the mix and have them really be very clear. With that, you can really understand everything that's happening. And again, what's interesting is I can change the blend of the two sounds for different parts if I need to, depending on the riffs and all that.
Yeah, you can
so that's always interesting.
Yeah. You can choose to balance it. Yeah.
And so that's basically the whole rhythm guitar sound. And when you listen to the guitars, you can find, okay, maybe it lacks power and all that, but you should always remember that there's the bass behind it. And so that's why, your guitars, you should not have too much low frequency to, like, you can hear how much of a difference it makes with the bass, right?
Yeah.
And like some engineers, they make the choice of having like the guitars louder or maybe with more bass or low frequency and have the bass really quiet in the mix. But I'm always frustrated when I listen to a band and I cannot hear the bass clearly. I like having the bass really be part of the music and be I guess that's because I listened to too much Rush when I was young, but
Yes.
But I like it when obviously in that style, the guitars and the drums, they kind of like the stars of the show. But I think it's nice that the bass has its own place. And to me, if you do your job correctly, when you have both together, you end with a powerful result. So you should always remember that the bass is part of your rhythm guitar sound. So if you want to check if your rhythm guitar sounds really kick-ass, you should always play it with the bass and see how it sounds together. And so I mentioned the extra. We can hear the bass finger. Yeah, it does the name. So yeah, thankfully the track were really named appropriately, so I didn't have to do any guesswork.
Yeah.
And so if I solo the fingered bass parts. So as you can hear, I still muted a lot of high frequencies because I still wanted a very smooth sound, but there are still a bit more high frequency than on the other track, and the compression is a bit different than the other, and so yeah, I like to use a different track for that. So yeah, here, yeah, the main rhythm and all that, it's all played on a pick. This one, it's kind of similar, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I like this very round bass part. Because yeah, on that kind, especially on that part. Yeah, because there is much more space. Even with the treble completely muted, you can still hear what is playing. Yeah, you can very clearly hear the do 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 do. Wait, and what I did, well, I'm saying that, and that one of the reason that I forgot is that yeah, I added the growl mid part here, precisely so that this smooth part was more understandable, but I made it way lower in the mix. You can see like big automation here, lowering its level. So actually so yeah, there's a bit of mid so that we can understand more clearly what is playing. And so here, during that part, again, there's just this track. And starting from here, there's the mid growl track that comes back again so that we can understand his notes a bit better. Now, isolated, it seems like maybe there's too much medium, but because at that point there are more guitars that come back. Yeah, those two tracks. Yeah, it helps the bass pop a little bit. And so that's why having a few different tracks with which it's almost like you're sculpting the sound with different tracks. It might seem like a ton of extra work, but I think it's actually kind of easier because sometimes you can add like this one is very smooth, low frequency. This one is very aggressive in the mids, but it makes the notes pop out a bit more. So if I want that, I can just add that part here on that track. And if it's too loud, I just have to lower the volume and make the volume back at its initial point when we're going into the big rhythm again, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's kind of the same philosophy for almost every instrument. For the drum is kind of the same. Like I would, during that part, for example, I would cut the drum samples. I would only keep the natural sound. And when it goes back into a big blast beat, I would add a little bit of samples and so on. And yeah, those kind of blending techniques, I think it's really helped. And because the music is very, maybe it's more diverse on this album than on the previous albums. It may be less constantly violent, like it has really more smooth parts and some parts where you almost like prog and all that, but then all of a sudden it goes back to being like super violent and fast and all that. So yeah, I think this album has more different stuff going on. So using that kind of mixing techniques helped me adapt the sound of the song. And in the end, the idea is that you should not have the impression that you're listening to a different band when there's a quiet part, right? It should still be cohesive. So I have a few different tracks, and I would kind of like change and do a blend of different stuff, but almost always based on the same. Like it's important that it's not like that it's still sound. That's why I always use like the same drum tracks, but I would change the blend of trigger and natural sound. So yeah, that's how I solved the challenge of the music
you managed to re-get all the different moods of the record and make it sound cohesive. So I think you managed to to do it really, really well, I think.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. Yeah. You just you built yourself a palette to work with within the songs. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah. And I knew that when I talked about bass, someone would mention Injustice for All. But yeah, that album is like the opposite of what I try to achieve. It's like, yeah, I mean, nothing against Metallica, but yeah, that album is like they did Jason Newsted a little bit dirty with that album. But yeah, I like when you can hear the bass and its part, even if the bass is not doing a lot. I always like to hear it and not just be like basically the low frequency of the guitar. And and in a band like Fractal or other bands who try to push the envelope and think about things and write complicated stuff, and the bass is not always doing what the guitar is doing, it's obviously interesting to have the bass have its own place. But yeah, in metal it's not always easy because like the guitar takes so much space, and there's a bit of compromise involved. Like the guitars could have been heavier on this album, and I totally realized that. But at the same time, it's like you can't have everything all the time. You have to make some choices. So yeah.
And what other albums are you working on at the moment, or have you been working on in the past month?
So in the past months, you could say in the past year, I've worked on the Deficiencies album, which is like a big metal band in locally, right? It's like one of the biggest metal bands in our northeastern quarter of France. I think it sounds really, really good. Not to pat myself on the back, but what's interesting on that album is that it's going to be mastered by Tony Lingon, who works at Fascination Street Studios. And if you don't know who Fascination Street Studios is, I can tell you they've mixed your favorite metal albums because they have worked with everyone.
Definitely.
And like everyone from like Symphony X to Leprous to Devin Townsend to Sepultura to everyone. And to me, they're like the best in the world. And we sent one of the tracks I mixed, and to get some feedback and some notes. So I was quite apprehensive. But I sent it back, and it didn't make a single comment about the drum, bass, or guitar sound. So I was like, and he just said that the vocals needed a bit more compression and punch, and that the acoustic guitars were a bit dull. And that's it. And I was like, wow, okay, that's kind of great to hear. So yeah, I'm really curious to hear what he's going to do with that. But yeah, that album is really sounding great. There's a question. Wasn't it a Deficiency Slasher concert?
No, Cyril said a few minutes ago that he saw Slasher live some years ago, and I think he's asking if it was with Deficiency. Honestly, I don't remember. Can you tell me the venue maybe? I think I would maybe see it more clearly. But yeah,
But yeah, the Deficiency, like they've played with a ton of people, and yeah, they're really, really good band, kind of in the vein of Soilwork a little bit, but yeah, really great.
And apart from them, have you been working on other records lately?
Yeah, well, I'm working on my own solo album, so not at all in terms of sound engineering. Well, yes, I do, because I have to mix it too. But it's a completely different process, because it's not a metal album. It's a synthwave album, and I've worked on it this summer, and because it's like I'm someone who kind of need to be pushed and motivated. I'm working with a friend, and I gave him a deadline, and so which tremendously helped me write it. And so I told him, okay, I'm gonna have this summer to write the 10 tracks. So I'm gonna have to send you one track every 2 weeks. And I'm currently writing the 9th track. So yeah, it's it's going well, because yeah, it's sometimes really hard, like when you have absolutely zero incentive because you're not working for anyone. You know, it can be really hard to set aside some time to work on that stuff and all that, knowing that you're not paid for it, at least not now and probably never. And but yeah, you have to, especially someone like me who suffers a lot from procrastination and stuff like that. So when I have people behind my back, it's not a problem. But when I have to work on myself or solo stuff and all that, it can be really hard. So yeah, that was a way to having a carrot at the end of the stick, and be like, yeah, every 2 weeks, gonna send him a track. Otherwise, he would yell at me. And yeah, it's been going really good. And other mixing stuff, not right now. Well, I have other things that will start after the summer, and so I'm gonna have a lot of work. But that's why I had a little bit of pause here, and you know, because of COVID situation, it's kind of, you know.
Yeah, I guess there are not that many bands recording at Boundless Productions at the moment. Because of the pandemic and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a strange time, because bands, they obviously have more time to write stuff and record, because obviously there haven't been live shows for a year and a half. I mean, I guess it's starting slowly again, but at the same time, it's also complicated with the restrictions to open the studio and have people come in here, and some people are a bit cautious of that. And also yeah, it's been a bit of a strange time. But because I had no projects this summer, I was like, okay, this is a perfect time to work on something and be productive, and work on my stuff. And you know, so it's supposed to come out in November, and that's also something that helps, setting a deadline, right? Because again, when you don't have any deadline, you're like, yeah, whatever. But you know, it's far enough that I don't have too much stress and I can sleep at night. But at the same time, it's like it's fixed, it's gonna happen, and so I have to work regularly on it. So yeah, I think I found the solution to that. But you know, I mean, it's a bit of a more personal stuff, but it's like, yeah, I've always struggled with like procrastination and attention deficit, and yeah, it's never been a problem when I'm working with people. But when I'm alone, it's always like, and when I have to mix stuff like that, it's like I can, you know, take a bit too much time, because I know I have time. And I mean, you know, I like to take my time with that, but it's like working with a band, it's still, you still have, you know, something to, you have to show results, right? but when you really want to work for yourself, you really have to have a lot of discipline. And I've really worked on myself on that recently, because first of all I realized that, which is like the first step. and yeah, now I think, and I'm trying to have a better workflow, because in the past I used to spend a lot of time on stupid crap that would make me lose a lot of time. But yeah, nowadays I'm working on myself, and yeah, trying to be better at what I do, more productive, and yeah, it's been going on well. I guess that last year was a a time of self-reflection for many people, probably.
Yeah, for
Because
sure.
a lot of people didn't have anything else to do. But there's a question. What are the instruments you write your songs for? Metal band, prog, pop. So if you're talking about that project in particular, it's completely synthesizers. So I really went all in on the synthwave aspect of it. So so maybe there are going to be real drums, maybe I already know that Clément wants to participate, but I don't know. We'll see. Like, sometimes, depending on the genre you're doing, artificial drums can be better for a purely aesthetic point of view, but for now, it's totally instrumental and totally like synths and all that. And yeah, on my YouTube channel, it's mostly metal and all that. And band I was with before, it was like prog symphonic metal. So even if there was a bit of synth, there was mainly orchestral stuff and guitars. But yeah, it's nice to have something where I can finally like really go all in and use all the crazy sounds that I want. No real bass, all the bass are synths, and again, there's such a palette of different sounds you can use for that kind of stuff. It's really fun, and you can make things that sound really powerful and really mean just with synthesizers. And I like that aspect of also, like I like people like Derek Sherinian, who use like sounds with a ton of distortion and stuff like that. You can tell he wants to mimic the sound of a guitar, but I like it because it's it's different. It's it is its own sound, and I like that stuff. And you can blend it with real guitars, like Mick Gordon, what he did for the soundtrack of Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, right? Like, that stuff sounds nasty, and powerful, I like going into that, more industrial type of stuff. So yeah, that's a project I'm mostly focusing on right now, and I've got a few mixing projects, but they will all start after the summer. So I know that after the summer I'm going to have a ton of work that's going to come at me all of a sudden. So right now
you have to finish the record.
I'm using that yeah, I'm like, okay, that's another that's another kind of soft deadline, so to speak. It's like, yeah, I have to do it right now because I won't have any time.
And speaking about your YouTube channel, maybe, Hugo, you can post the link and maybe you can talk a little bit about it. So you're doing covers of like video game songs and all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that YouTube channel is kind of, to me, it's a bit an opportunity to go back to my roots, right? Because like, I learned music on a computer, and I obviously grew up with like surrounded by video games and all that. So it's really part of my culture and even of my music background, because like music soundtracks, they influenced me almost as much as bands or real music. But yeah, that was really part of my upbringing, and so there's a bit of nostalgia involved. And it's kind of like, also, yeah, at the time when I was transcribing songs, I would also obviously transcribe songs from video games and stuff like that, but I would also transcribe like Iron Maiden songs or anything else, but that was also part of my kind of musical journey. So yeah, what I'm doing is like it all comes together kind of on my channel. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna. So I understand it's not very original because a ton of people are doing that, but and it's a great way to experiment different stuff. Because like one song, I'm gonna say, hey, I'm gonna cover it in that style, or sometimes it's like, yeah, I would like to sing something, and because I don't have a band as a lead singer, I'm like, oh yeah, I can do that video, that cover on my channel, and just have fun with it. So it's a great way of experimenting thing and having fun. And again, Clement also plays drums on a lot of my stuff there. So every time it's an opportunity to experiment with drum recording and do things differently every time. And so, and I'm also having a ton of fun with video editing.
Yeah,
So,
the
yeah,
thing you did on Bohemian Rhapsody was like insane, I think, in terms of the editing.
Yeah, I really went all in, maybe a bit too much, but I like, I like also like some cheesy stuff and some crazy editing, but yeah, because also I love like also movies and stuff like that. So, and really paying attention to how a thing is filmed and edited, even in a movie. And recently I've actually done movie soundtracks. I've done the theme from Predator. The one with like dun 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 dun. And so again, for this one, it was almost impossible to find a transcription of the orchestral score, because I don't think it's a very common thing that people are very interested in, right? It's not like finding the tap for Smoke on the Water. That's like, of course, every beginner guitarist is going to want to learn that song, so you can find a billion tabs of that, or of guitar metal songs or whatever. But finding transcriptions of that, it was like, so I transcribed the entire soundtrack for that. I mean, that theme, not the entire movie, but the Predator main theme. And then when I had basically the whole song transcribed, what I did is add drums, bass, and guitars. And that was the way I did it. And the next one I'm going to do, which is already recorded, mixed, filmed, and edited, so the video is like ready, is Dune, because the film is coming out at the end of October.
Oh, amazing.
So
is it the new soundtrack that you did?
So it's a new one, in exclusivity on twitch.tv/Fractal Universe. I am announcing that my next video, it's going to be the prologue and main theme from Dune 1984, the David Lynch movie, which had a kick-ass soundtrack by Toto of all bands. and they did a great job. Like, there's some really ominous themes and some really great sounding orchestral stuff. And so I took that and I made a metal version. It's funny because if you listen to the original soundtrack, you can hear guitars in the background and a bit of synthesizers too, even though the bulk of it is orchestral. And so I did my own version, and I did also some bit of crazy editing with blending some images of the movie with showing us playing. So again, it's Clement on the drums, and those guys on bass and guitars, because I'm tired of playing bass and guitars and I'm not good at it, so I hire people to do it for me. So
I've heard the cover, and honestly, I can't wait to hear it again. It was really, really brilliant. Really, I'm looking forward. I don't know. Sometimes I
played it
at Clement's studio.
Yeah.
And
that
my mind was blown.
Oh, thank you. And so that's that. And it's really cool. And I think I'm kind of branching out, because I think like video game stuff it's becoming like many people are doing it. But I think film scores, covers, it's more unusual, and maybe it requires also a bit more skill in transcribing, because obviously it's not recording a video game soundtracks with like four tracks of instruments. It's kind of different from transcribing a whole orchestra and all that, And so, but it's really, because it's really my bread and butter, and it's really something that I can do well. I was like, yeah, it's a great way to use my skill. I can transcribe some really complex stuff and do arrangements and that. So yeah, I think I'm gonna do that more in the future. And also because on YouTube it's really difficult to get any views and all that. I was like, okay, there's a Dune movie coming out. I love the theme from from the old Dune movie, so I'm going to use that that hype and use the keyword Dune Dune movie to hopefully get more views on my video. I mean, I know it sounds a bit opportunistic, but when you spend so much time, so many hours doing something, I mean, and it's not like I'm doing something that I don't like, the goal was to find a way to do a thing that I love and make it so that the video could get a bit more views than usual, and all that.
I think they very recently released like some bits of the soundtrack from the new movie as well. There are some tracks on YouTube as well. I don't know if you have seen that already.
No, I've seen like the second trailer that came out like 4 or 5 days ago. But I haven't listened to the score for the new movie. So yeah, maybe I should like transcribe it and make a cover super fast and really small at the same time. But that's yeah.
the new challenge. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm gonna have to listen to that. I guess it's Hans Zimmer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna have to listen to it. But yeah, I think it opens up a new field of stuff. Like there are so many film scores that are iconic and would be really cool in a like metal prog environment. So I think there's a lot to do here. So yeah.
All right. I think we've covered all the topics that we wanted to discuss. I don't know if you have anything you want to add, or if you guys in the chat have any questions left. Then now's the time.
Yeah, didn't realize I spoke for 2.5 hours, but
yeah, it's getting it's close to 11 p.m. already.
I hope it's not too boring, but
oh no.
And it's worth mentioning that this is going to be available on YouTube for rewatch.
Yep.
Later on. So if you missed the beginning, want to listen to some of the stuff again, you will be able to.
And yes, someone, I think Baz said that it was like a masterclass actually. So thank you for your time and your
all
your knowledge.
Well, thank you. I mean, yeah, it's not often that you have that kind of opportunity. So yeah, it was really fun. And so yeah, very original format. So yeah, and it's funny because I have a lot to say, but I'm not a very talkative person in general. So I will not spontaneously like give a masterclass and tell everything about all the stuff I do. But if I'm asked that, I will. So so yeah, it's like yeah, especially like. In a party after a few beers, if someone asks me about music, I can speak like for 3 hours straight.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Flavien, how did we discover autotune? For example, yeah. Do you have any way for people to contact you if they wish to have some mastering or mixing stuff to do?
Yeah, well, Yeah, I think that I've also done a bit of mixing lessons and piano lessons. So, well, I guess piano lessons is kind of complicated by Skype and all that. I guess it's possible, but mixing definitely possible. So there's also that.
And
But just advice or whatever in general, that's also possible.
how can they contact you on Facebook or any social network? Maybe.
Yeah, Facebook is the easiest way, I think. So it's Flavien Morel, just my name on Facebook. I think you tagged me on the Facebook news that you did for tonight, right?
Yeah.
So people can go there. But if you don't have a Facebook, you can just send me emails at, so it's my name. So it's Flavien. Well, for English speakers, it's not, not an easy name.
It's okay if I write it down in the chat for you?
Yeah, like Flavien.morel at gmail.com. So it's just my first name and last name at gmail.com.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. And yeah, you can reach me there. But yeah, I mainly use Facebook as a messaging system.
Okay. Yeah.
Because
that's fair.
a lot of musicians and bands are on there just by necessity. So yeah. But yeah, no, that was really interesting. I think there were maybe I can just show you what I was talking about for the piano part, if I can find it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's it. So here's the piano track. So I think that's what you sent me, Vince. So I compressed the crap out of it. And I had a generous amount of reverb and delay because, yeah, it was a very atmospheric ambient part. And to make it pop a little bit, I doubled it with that sound of my own. And together, it sounds like that, yeah. And yeah, that's the interesting thing about mixing, is that sometimes that kind of trick, I did that almost as a utilitarian thing. I did that just to help the piano pop a little bit. But it's also creative because it's like, I was like, okay, what kind of sounds would really sound nice on top of that and help achieve the goal? So yeah, sometimes mixing, you kind of have to use that kind of tricks. And yeah, sometimes I would double, if there's really a riff that's super heavy, sometimes I would just play a low note on a distorted synth that just played the fundamental and hide it very low in the mix just to make the guitar sound and the bass sound even bigger. Stuff like that. And I think I did that for deficiency on a riff. And what I like to do is not tell anyone and realize, are they going to notice it? And if they just say, wow, it sounds super heavy, I'm like, okay, my job is done. Because I don't want that to be too noticeable. I just really want to help the riff sound better. But yeah, because it's not like they want a keyboard player, they just want the riff to sound fat. So that's the kind of stuff I would do sometimes.
Okay.
All right, guys. If you have any more questions, now's the time. Otherwise, yeah, thank you so much for joining us, you people in the chat, and Flavien, thanks for taking part in this. It was really a pleasure it was very interesting to talk about all of this stuff, and I hope people got something out of it as well. We're going to try to do more of these Fractal Talks in the future. Also, the plan is to invite some guests from other bands and whatever, maybe in the future. So that will be something we'll be working on in the coming months.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, that would be cool, yeah.
And yeah, if you want to support Flavien or the band, feel free to give Flavien a subscription on YouTube, to follow him on the social media and everything. Make the same for the band if you don't already. And yeah.
you can
Yep.
see us tomorrow, Vince, Clément, and me, on Twitch at 7 p.m. Central European Summertime, just chatting about our live stream event that we put together last Sunday. So see you tomorrow, maybe, guys.
Yeah, we're gonna
Yeah.
talk to you about the behind the scenes stuff from the shooting. Flavien was actually there. He was one of the
Yeah,
holding one
Yes.
of the cameras actually. So.
yeah. He was holding the camera on the left of the stage, on my side.
Yeah.
On the
So if
far-
there's so if there's any shot from the left, that's I'm responsible for that. So
Yeah.
sorry if it doesn't look good. That was me. Yeah, that was a great great experience filming that. I mean, yeah, you guys were kind of under pressure, right, when you were filming that stuff?
Yeah, kind of. But yeah, if we really screwed up one song, we could have played it again.
A do-over, yeah.
But yeah, it was a really great experience. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for having me. That was really really great.
All right, guys. That's it then. Thank you once again for watching, and we hope to see you tomorrow and on our upcoming streams as well. See you guys.
Bye.